The United States is dealing with two of the biggest scandals in our country's history. I want to go through each one of those, as well as new revelation coming out about the Department of Education and Pete Buttigieg.
Watching the testimony of this woman here, Annie Thomasini.
American taxpayer
She's the
money.
former senior advisor to
I have
President
my
Joe
special
Biden.
guest,
She was
Ashley
the third
Hayek.
person
Ashley, thank you so much
set
for
to
being
appear
here.
before James
Thanks for
Comer's
having me.
committee. She has now taken the fifth.
A little background for my audience. Ashley is the president of America First Works. She is also the author of Beat the Elites and Beat the Cheats. I will make sure to put links to both of those down below. Right now, the United States, there's people that are literally debating, is this the biggest scandal? Is this the biggest scandal? So we have the cover-up of Joe Biden's mental decline and the abuse of the Autopin to pass hundreds of billions of dollars in legislation, install over 280 new judges, over 8,000 pardons, most of which were signed by the Autopin. Then the director of national intelligence, Tulsi GAbbard, drops an absolute bombshell saying they now have the paper trail that leads the Russiagate hoax directly to President Barack Obama in an attempted coup against Donald Trump and the U.S. government. Which of these do you think is bigger? I mean, they are both huge.
They're huge stories. I mean, there's a couple things. Today is the day that Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential campaign in 2024, which is noteworthy in and of itself because we had a mainstream media, we had, you know, the Hollywood elites telling us that he's totally fine. Like, he's fine, he's great. There's nothing wrong with him. His mental capacity is fine. And we were gaslit. The American people were gaslit for so long until he finally had the disastrous debate and dropped out of the race. And that just leads to one of the things I was thinking about as it pertains to the pen, the Autopin. If you recall, when he dropped out, it was on a memo with no letterhead. Yeah. It was just like a blank piece of paper with his signature. And I have to wonder, was he pushed out? What is the story behind that as well? Because, you know, the Democrat Party really drugged their feet. They wanted to just push him across the finish line, let him continue to take his vacations and run the country by Autopin.
Yeah, it is something. I want to bring something up here on the stage. Hunter Biden is saying the reason that my dad had a bad debate was he was actually on Ambien. He had taken an Ambien before debating Donald Trump, and that's why he was such a terrible debater. But this is just another lie from the Biden crime family, from the Democrat Party. So we just set a record of raising $25 million to a couple weeks later, this guy drops out of being president of the United States with a Twitter post. What do you make of Hunter Biden's new story?
Well, the other thing it actually makes you question, this is a man who has a 4 p.m. bedtime. You know, what is he doing taking an Ambien before a debate that's prime time? None of it makes sense. Hunter Biden had an interview. He was mumbling. He doesn't sound quite sober himself at this point. Don't know that for a fact, obviously. But I mean, this is what we're dealing with. It's just the constant lies from the left, which kind of ties directly into what we're seeing right now with what Tulsi GAbbard dropped last Friday as it pertains to Russiagate. You know, whether it's throughout the entire first term of President Trump's presidency, them going after him with complete lies, to now the Autopin through Biden's term. This is the party of the Democrat Party is basically full of lies, vagueness, no transparency whatsoever. And now I think we're coming into an era where there needs to be accountability.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get that. That's something that my audience, that I personally want to see, is we're done with the investigations. We want to see somebody actually be accountable. Now, I don't want to take 12 minutes to rewatch the entire interview with Tulsi Gabbard, but Maria in the Morning on Fox, she asked, are we going to get accountability? Let me go ahead and show you what Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, had to say.
So do you expect, just to be clear, do you expect indictments and prosecutions?
I'm not a lawyer. In my view, we have the evidence to be able to move forward and bring about justice, yes, to prosecute and indict those responsible.
So she's saying, listen, I'm not a lawyer, but we've now found this evidence. We've built this paper trail. We've found the evidence. We've now handed it off to the FBI and the DOJ. I would expect there to be accountability. This seems like the highest up people in the Trump administration are serious about actually doing something. Your thoughts on that?
Well, if you look at the timeline and everything that she was able to lay out, and I believe there was also a whistleblower that was involved, which made a lot of this possible. Like, this could not be possible if it weren't for that person coming forward. And it's why it's just so important to have these people who are willing to take that risk and come forward. Basically, the entire intelligence community had been saying for months leading up to the 2016 election that there was no Russian interference, there was no foreign interference in the elections. Then in December, there was supposed to be a press briefing where President Obama was supposed to say there was no foreign interference in the elections. That was pulled down. The next day after that, there was a meeting with McCabe and Susan Rice and several of the Obama officials to discuss foreign interference in the elections and specifically talk about Russia, which then led to the Mueller investigation. $32 million of taxpayer money wasted on a complete hoax scam by the Democrat Party, by the Obama administration, by our own intelligence community. Meanwhile, if you recall, the whole situation with Hillary Clinton. So Senator Grassley has done an incredible job of shining a light. So while this is happening, while they're using, intelligence resources to basically say that there is an interference in our election and go after President Trump and use that as the justification for our president to be wiretapped during the campaign, an American being wiretapped, another scandal that needs to be elevated yet again and remind the American people. But Hillary Clinton and her servers, they didn't even dig into that at all. It was shameful. They put kid gloves on her, and there needs to be some accountability. Today, Pam Bondi has released additional files relating to that to Senator Grassley. So all of this comes full circle. It's all tied together. It's the radical left, pushing back against the America First movement, pushing back against, transparency and accountability, and making up lies. One more thing I think is really important. President Obama made a comment about the election machines and how, we're worried about there being foreign interference. Do you remember what happened in 2020 when people were making claims about election machines? They were completely criticized. They were sued. When they went to go speak and share their story on January 6th, some of them were thrown in prison. Like, talk about a double standard hypocrisy from the Democrat, from the Obama administration, and everyone on the radical left, and Adam Schiff too.
Yeah. Well, to me, just as an outsider, it seems like they thought Hillary was going to win. And so then when she didn't, they do this treasonous coup, as Tulsi GAbbard says, and they try to undermine and remove Donald Trump. When they can't do that, then they rig the election in 2020 to get him removed. I think that they were caught off guard. They didn't think that he was going to come back in. And now they start digging around and they're finding stuff. The thing that is interesting to me is, how come John Durham didn't find this information? How come Robert Mueller didn't find this? Is it because they weren't looking, or was it hidden? Your thoughts on that?
Well, and you look at whether it's the special prosecutors, you look at some of the U.S. attorneys in 2020 and even 2020, Southern District, New York, has been, a hotbed of corruption that we've seen with different U.S. attorneys taking on several of the same cases, which is actually not very common. So I think they're all complicit. It's part of this, big government movement to stop the American people. And President Trump said it throughout the entire campaign. They're coming after you. I'm just in the way. And every time we get a story like this, it just continues to prove that time and time again, whether it's, some of these corrupt U.S. attorneys, the special prosecutors, they're all friends. They're all Washington, D.C. buddies. They're all, hanging out together. And so not every single person in government is terrible, but you did have a very strong group of people tied to the Obama administration that were trying to undermine President Trump and everything he was trying to do for the American people.
Yeah. Again, this does seem different than other times where now it's the top people that are calling for this. I don't know if you saw this. This was comical, and yet I don't think President Trump is joking around, but he's now putting out an AI video of Barack Obama being arrested. And so I feel like he is signaling to everybody, once this evidence comes out, there is no reason that somebody should be allowed to commit treason within the United States, to undermine an incoming president, and go after political enemies. Your thoughts, are they going to be able to go up to Obama, or is he going to be protected as a former president and they'll just get everyone else?
Well, President Trump was a former president, and they had multiple lawsuits against him, arrested him, took, false charges against him. And this is the difference between President Trump and President Obama, is there's actually evidence of a wrongdoing with President Obama. And so this is the opportunity, I think, for the Department of Justice, for there to actually be consequences for these actions. That it was just so wrong. It was completely wrong what they've done to President Trump. And just in addition to the criminal charges or the charges that they went after him, whether it was, his property, all of it was so ridiculous and so far-fetched, caused him to lose millions and millions of dollars, put his family through hell, put them under depositions time and time again. And he continued to fight. The language that they use, like confront Trump supporters, go after them in the streets, showing pictures of President Trump being assassinated, led to him almost being assassinated. So these are the things that the left has just done time and again. And, I love President Trump's sense of humor. I think he really connects with the American people, but I think he's saying, okay, time's up. There is something wrong here, and we need to pursue justice in this case.
Yeah. Just as a reminder to my audience, Don Jr. is the most subpoenaed man in history. So when they couldn't get Donald J. Trump, they went after Don Trump Jr., and they were trying to, almost like the mafia, squeeze President Trump into dropping out, and he did not. I want to put forward a theory and just talk it through with you, Ashley. But not long ago, FBI Director Kash Patel went on the Joe Rogan show. While he was on there, he said, while cleaning out the Hoover building, we found secret rooms with files. Joe Rogan says, what's in those? He's like, it's bad. The stuff we're finding, I can't say anymore. I can't say anymore. So part of me wonders if Robert Mueller and John Durham didn't have access to this. Maybe they aren't bad guys or inefficient prosecutors or something. Maybe this stuff was hidden by James Comey or other people at the FBI. I'm just wondering if now they find these hidden rooms, which he said was tied to James Comey, who's now officially under investigation. I'm wondering if this was like the missing link that they needed in order to connect Obama and some of these other people. Your thoughts?
I think they're all connected, because if you look at that meeting that happened in December of 2016, after the election, after the press conference was taken down or the memo was taken down, it was Clapper, McCabe, Brennan, Rice. It was all of the top officials meeting, strategizing. I think there was like 20 something officials that were meeting to discuss Russian interference, and then gave that information, leaked that information to Washington Post and other news outlets. So I just have no doubt. I'm sure there's terrible things in those files. I'm sure there were things that they're hoping no one would find. But every part of me believes that they were all in on it together, because it rolled over each one of the time that they had served, right? So each one of it just rolled into the next thing. It rolled into the next so-called conspiracy against President Trump that they were in fact perpetuating. They were creating the lies, and it was a handoff. And so I don't think anyone in this case, from that perspective, is innocent.
What if you could delay your next 2 mortgage payments? That's right. Imagine putting those 2 payments in your pocket and finally getting a little breathing room. It's possible when you call American Financing today. If you're feeling stretched by everyday expenses, groceries, gas, bills piling up, you're not alone. Most Americans are putting these expenses on a credit card, and there doesn't seem to be a way out. American Financing can show you how to use your home's equity to pay off your debt. You need to call American Financing today before you get to a point where you can't make these payments. Their salary-based mortgage consultants are helping homeowners just like you restructure their loans and consolidate debt, all without upfront fees. and their customers are saving on average $800 a month. That's like a $10,000 a year raise by being smarter with your money. It's fast, it's simple, and it could save your budget this summer. Call now before it's late at 888-686-8030. That's 888-686-8030, or visit americanfinancing.net/Gardner. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's just from what I'm reading, the orders came from Obama that now the presidential daily brief says there was no interference. We can't have that go out. So now the intelligence is to be flipped, and everyone is to focus on pushing this story out and leak as much as you can to the mainstream media. I want to go back to those hidden boxes. This was an interesting interview with a former FBI. Let's watch this and then we'll react to it together.
Speculation, this is a little bit deeper than just even Russiagate, and that there are still classified documents of this alleged grand conspiracy. Take a listen to what FBI Director Kash Patel said just this past Sunday in an interview.
That's how vindictive and vicious the former leadership structure here was. Not only did they bastardize the FISA process and lie to the American public, they withheld and hid documentation and put it in rooms where people weren't supposed to look. And it's a good thing we're here now to clean it up, and you're about to see a wave of transparency.
I got to get your thoughts on this, especially the comment that was made here that former administration intelligence officials, again, former Biden administration intelligence officials, hid documents in rooms where people aren't supposed to look.
Yeah, it's amazing. Having worked at headquarters a couple of times, there are plenty of rooms to hide things. But the big question, Jan, why would you do that? The FBI's case management system can handle very sensitive investigation. It can be compartmentalized. The other question I have is, traditionally, in my time, investigations are worked in the field, but you had these investigations almost being run at headquarters. Peter Strzok was like the agent that did everything in the FBI. He handled all of these. He was a deputy assistant director at headquarters. That never should have happened. These should have been field cases. But yeah, hiding these documents, I'm so glad that now somebody will get us the answers as to why.
So, former FBI, yeah, there's a lot of places that you could hide documents, but the thing that was more suspicious to him is, why wasn't this a field investigation? Why were the very top people in the room with Obama the ones that handled this entire thing? It's because they were in on it. They were absolutely in on it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's interesting because, as I was talking about earlier, the U.S. Attorney, Southern District, New York, there are one attorney in particular was responsible for handling the Giuliani Ukraine case, Michael Cohen, Michael Avenatti, Chris Collins, the Kremlin tied lawyer, like 8 of the most high profile cases with one other FBI director, field director in New York. It actually just makes you wonder, like, how deep does this corruption go? It's clearly happening in SDNY. Remember, SDNY is the one that accidentally leaked the memo that was about the price congestion with Secretary Duffy, and had accidentally put the memo out there. I mean, this is a connected web of just garbage that has to be exposed, and we need to make sure that this never happens again.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the Southern District of New York, because lawyer Alan Dershowitz, who represented Epstein and Trump during the first impeachment, he said, I've seen the documents. Donald Trump's name is nowhere on there. And Donald Trump and Pam Bondi, they don't have those documents. They are hidden in the Southern District of New York, and they are sealed. Hopefully that stuff will be released soon. Let me switch gears with you. The other big scandal, this Autopin scandal. I want to bring up some information from Congressman James Comer. He's the one leading this investigation. We want to know, are they going to be able to unravel this? Is this just a credibility hit, or is there actual teeth? Let me go ahead and run this clip.
Pavlich here. It's great to see you. So what is the goal of this investigation? And are you looking at criminal charges for any of these aides? What are you looking for in terms of getting information from these officials? And why would they plead the Fifth if it's simply about their work in the White House?
Yeah.
Well, they plead the Fifth to avoid self-incrimination. I think that says it all. Dan Goldman, who's a Democrat member of Congress, who used to be on the House Oversight Committee, who was the prosecutor for the Southern District of New York, he's famously quoted as saying, you don't plead the Fifth unless you're guilty of something. That's Dan Goldman's own words. But the purpose of the investigation is to get the truth to the American people. Look, this is the biggest scandal in the history of American politics. President Trump has said that many times, and I agree 100% with that assessment. We want to get the truth, and we want to, first of all, hold people accountable. But secondly, we want to look at everything that was signed with the Autopin. There were a lot of presidential pardons. There were a lot of executive orders. There were some even nominees in the Biden administration. Their paperwork that was signed with the Autopin at a time when the president's mental fitness is in question. Look, when his doctor, Dr. O'Connor, wouldn't answer a simple question, were you ever told to lie about President Biden's health? And he had to plead the Fifth Amendment to avoid self-incrimination on that question. I think that shows that the smoke around the Biden mental fitness theory is a raging fire now. So we're going to try to see, first of all, what really happened with the Autopin. We're getting a lot of good information we're going to be able to produce at the end of this investigation, which hopefully will be in the next couple of months. But also, it's going to raise questions as to whether these executive orders and pardons are legal. And I think that is a big issue for the American people.
It is a big issue for us. But the bigger one is, let's say that they do discover all of this. Are we going to see executive orders unwound? Are we going to see placement of judges or a Supreme Court justice unwound? Your thoughts on that?
Well, I want them to keep pulling the thread, because I think, the fact that his doctor pled the Fifth is directly tied to all of this. Who was pushing President Biden during this? There's an old clip of Obama, I think it was Obama, Nancy Pelosi saying that this was Obama's third term in office, that Biden was the continuation of that. And I want to pull the thread to see exactly where this leads us to, who was behind it. Yes, you have, a staffer signing the Autopin. So who was the mastermind behind those policies that needs to also be held accountable? And the other question is Jill Biden guilty of elder abuse? To put him through what she put him through, watching those clips of him falling up the stairs, down the stairs, across the stage, it's actually incredibly sad to see what they did to this man. It's also devastating what he did to our military, to our country, to the American people, and someone has to be held accountable for it. And that's what I hope that they keep pulling the thread on.
I agree. I whether somebody goes to jail or not, I at least want the truth. But I do believe that there could be people that go to jail. Now, I believe so far 5 have come in. All 5 have pled the Fifth. What's interesting, later in this interview, and I won't take time to show it, Ashley, but Congressman Comer says later this week, the head guy in the White House, Ron Klain, he's coming in on his own volition. So he's not being subpoenaed. Therefore, he can't plead the Fifth. They believe they're actually going to get some answers out of him, and they may end up pushing for an immunity plea. I don't know. We'll see what he ends up saying later this week. I'll make sure to cover that. But I think one of the hardest things that they're going to have to prove is, on this day when he didn't sign, was there a paper trail that gave permission to sign? And then number 2, how do you prove he was mentally declined on any particular calendar day?
Well, and how much of that is on the government emails, and how much of that were they doing behind the scenes trying to hide that from the American people? There has been a lot of talk that I have heard of, would it be worth offering someone immunity, or would you not get what you want because there's not enough evidence to then, indict the people who are involved as well? So it's kind of like, do you really want the truth, or do we want to try and see if we can get more to make sure people are actually held accountable? Is there a trade-off? Is it worth the trade-off, or should we keep pushing until we get as much as we can before any sort of immunity deal is done?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the next thing we're going to hear is, well, when Obama did order the treasonous conspiracy hit against Trump, he was also on Ambien. There's no excuse for this. I mean, and this is straight up trying to do a coup on a president that beat your person, Hillary Clinton, who you believed would carry water for Obamacare and DEI and all of the other things that Democrats were trying to shove down our throat. Speaking of DEI, let me pull something up here to the stage. This is out just today. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg spent $80 billion of taxpayer money on DEI programs, grants where people got free money to help push forward diversity, equity, and inclusion instead of merit-based and skills and things like that. The money that he used was the money that was supposed to upgrade our airports, traffic control, and our transportation systems. Your thoughts on that huge amount of money going towards these DEI grants?
Well, let me explain how backwards Washington is. So you have Doge come in and try and reset to pull back some of these crazy grant funding, stuff like this, like the DEI stuff, so that we can actually get back to the services like air traffic control that matter to the American people. And the left is saying, oh, Trump is making cuts. He's making cuts, not actually telling the full story. One of the things that drove me crazy about Buttigieg in the Department of Transportation under President Biden was this $700 checks to people in East Palestine, Ohio, and this $700 checks to the people in Maui who were completely devastated and lost their communities. And you see such a stark contrast compared to today, but that's the story that no one wants to talk about. They feel like they are so right in doing these crazy DI grants as opposed to getting back to the core services that the American people need.
Yeah. Okay, last question. I appreciate you coming on. I know protecting children, the nuclear family, American pride, good education are things that are top of mind with you and your organization. What were your thoughts on the Supreme Court saying that, yes, of course, parents should have the right to opt out of LGBTQ 2SA plus education or indoctrination, depending on your stance, because a parent has the right to decide what their child is learning in public school. What were your thoughts on that?
Thank you. Finally, thank goodness. I would like for whole schools or school districts to be able to opt out of those types of programs and just get rid of all of it altogether. Parents should have control of their child's education. That's something we've always believed, something I've always believed. I put my children into a private school because I didn't want them exposed to any of that. And I had no way to guarantee that in Fairfax County public schools, the sister county to Loudoun County in Northern Virginia. I had no way of confirming that they would not shove some of this garbage down my kids' throats. So this is a huge win for parents, and I hope it's expanded. And that when we have our math scores are plummeting, when we have so much, our kids are so far behind, especially because of COVID. Now's the time to be doubling down on our education, on our core academics, not on this transgender garbage. The reason President Trump, I really believe, one of the big reasons he won was his ad in September that came out. They are for they am, I am for you, and that's just what this case signals.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think it's odd? I'm sure you don't, but I find it odd that there's this inverse correlation. The more money that was given to the Department of Education, which is mostly 99% Democrat run, the more money that was spent, the worse children did in school. The more money went up, the worse they did in math. The more money went up, the worse they did in English and reading. Isn't that so strange that we could throw money at something and make it worse?
Well, it just went to big government and it didn't go to the classroom. It never reached the kids. And we see the unions, they're the worst. Coming up is the anniversary of when Merrick Garland called parents domestic terrorists for standing up to their school boards. And this is such a new day for American parents and for this administration, for us to actually reclaim our rights as parents and make sure, how many ads do we see of, oh, there are children. They're not your children, they're my children. And we're going to keep it that way. And I think that's why so many more, suburban families even got involved in the election cycle and at their school board meetings. So I hope that continues. We have so much work to do because now that we do have more school choice in more states across the country, we have to make sure that there's transparency in curriculum. That will be the next step for the movement.
Yeah. I remember seeing all those Democrats saying that, your children are ours, they're ours, they're part of the community. It's like, no, the government does not own my child.
That's right.
I own my child. And then when they're older, they can, make their own decisions. What are some of the big things that you are focusing on as president of America First Works?
We're already thinking about the midterms. So this is going to be absolutely critical. We're looking at 38 counties across all of our target states. A couple of things that are very optimistic is that we are very much on offense. Now, there's only 4 times that the president's party has actually gained seats in the past 100 years. However, this president is like no other, and we have a lot more seats where we're going to be on offense than on defense. There are only 3 seats that Kamala Harris won that there's a Republican in that congressional district. So compare that to 2018 when we were big time on defense. I think this is a huge opportunity if we continue to be focused, disciplined in our messaging, and just really get out early to explain, exactly what the president is doing and how it benefits the American people. So that's a really big piece of what we're focused on right now.
Awesome. Yeah, I think they can. Everything that's Trump's done, the Democrats and the media have said he's going to ruin the country. What happens? He becomes more popular. Right? He's now more popular than Biden, Bush, and Obama at this time in their presidency. So he's got the momentum. He's got good ideas. I'm excited to be supporting and covering him. If people want to follow you online, Ashley, where can I point them?
You can go to @Ashley Hayek or @America First Works, or sign up on our website, americafirstworks.com, and we'll keep you updated with all of our events and activities.
Okay, I'll put those direct links down below. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, too.